The Federal Bureau of Investigation has not been investigating, especially when it comes to the Clintons, the Bidens, and their inner circle. Blaze News, The Mandate, starts right now. Welcome in, everyone. I'm Jill Savage, joined as always by Editor-in-Chief Matthew Peterson, back in Dallas.
You know, I spent a week in Israel and then a week in D.C. for NatCon, and it's good to be finally back in America. It's been a while.
Yeah, D.C. doesn't count, even though our D.C. politics editor, Chris Bedford, lives out there. That's kind of America, sometimes. It's a prettier America now.
So I had to move to Virginia.
But it's all federalized now, so at least D.C. is looking a little bit better than it has been in the past.
It is. We've got about one more week of federal occupation. And if you want to have fun, you want to park on the street, this is your week.
This is your week. Well, maybe they can get things going over there at the FBI, because it looks like right now they're running cover for the political insiders instead of actually investigating them. Senator Chuck Grassley is warning about these secret prohibited access files. And now whistleblowers are saying that top agents were messing with evidence. So the big question is, are they protecting names like Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden? So Matt, how big of a deal is this if the FBI is hiding files from oversight? What does it say about the culture right now in the Bureau?
Look, some people say, oh, this is old news. We already kind of know this. My take is the more we know, the better. And the more that the narrative goes out that the FBI has been really perverted and from its mission, its core mission for a long time, the better. And if we pull up Grassley's letter to DOJ, if we can do that, you know, what he says here is pretty important stuff. I mean, he says, look, the impact of parking records in a way that impedes or in some cases prevents responsive records from being produced to Congress pursuant to a valid request and during the course of court litigation, whether criminal or civil, is wide-ranging and potentially catastrophic to the constitutional requirements of why we have an FBI and a federal government in the first place. So what he's saying is, hey, a lot of my oversight requests over the years have been, thwarted because of these special code words and, parking documents in places where they can't be found. So, good for them for pulling this out. The more we have of this sort of thing, the better.
So, Bedford, how widespread is this? How much do we need to look into this and look at what the Bureau is doing right now? Because there are a lot of people on the right that before Donald Trump came into office said, hey, we really need to go after the FBI. And now that we're here, like there aren't that many changes that we're seeing, but we do like that Chuck Grassley back in April was bringing this to light.
It's good to see that from Grassley. I know that Cash has got a hard slog ahead of him. There's so many problems. They're so institutional. And that is the thing. If you're asking how common this is, it's cultural inside the executive branch. They do not want to be held accountable to Congress. They don't want they don't want Grassley asking them questions. They don't want Democrats asking them questions. They don't really want anybody asking them questions. They don't want the reporters in their ears. They want to be able to just continue about as if they've got their own little fiefdom. And that's not just the FBI. That's across the board. They're such a pain in the butt to actually report on or keep track of. And thank God, actually, for Chuck Grassley, because he is old enough to remember when the Senate actually did oversight and when the Senate actually demanded answers and when the Senate actually did supervise and oversee the executive as much as it possibly could. And that's not even something that happens with a lot of the younger guys. They don't even know how to do it. They don't know the first step. They think, oh, oversight, that means go on Fox, right? No, it doesn't. It means you have to demand these documents. And you have to understand that they're not always going to tell you the truth and that they're not always going to give you everything that you need. And you have to keep on digging and you have to work. And you have to work with moles. You have to work with whistleblowers. You have to work with reporters sometimes. You have to work with all different types of folks to investigate our own government and try to figure these out. Investigations are much harder than regular reporting because, generally speaking, or at least the interesting ones, the subjects of your investigation don't really want you looking there, and they don't want to give you the answers.
So anybody that's going in and saying, oh, the FBI, they should go through and fix it shelf, like what is the way to actually do this, Matt? When we look at all the systemic problems that we see, how do we actually get some actionable items moving forward?
Well, I mean, the phrase that I like to say over and over again that makes everyone nervous is actual structural reform of how these agencies operate. That almost seems like a pipe dream at this point when you see the cultural rot and just the way in which they operate as a whole. As Chris says, this isn't just about the FBI, but the FBI is a good example of it. So if you look at what we're doing now, I mean, the negative Nancy would say, well, stuff is all we're talking about 10 years old. I mean, we're going back not to the Hunter Biden laptop. We're going back to the Anthony Weiner laptop, which people have forgotten about. But I think it has to start with a narrative in the press and with the base of how bad things are, going through all the past injustices. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to come up from 10 years to 5 years to 4 years, right, all the way through the end of the Biden administration with this stuff. Uncover it all and get it out there, and then use that to say, here are the massive reforms that are needed now. And that means changing the way in which the Bureau operates. That means changing its culture. That perhaps means changing, again, some structural elements as to how, the actual operation works. And that would also mean getting rid of a ton of people who are still there. I mean, tens of thousands from really the Obama era or who represent the Obama era. So there's a long way to go. But it is helpful to go through some of these details and recount the sort of thing that's been going on there for a long time.
Well, I want to take a minute to thank everybody for watching and listening to the show. And it's because of people like you that we actually get to produce content like this. And Blaze TV exists because people like you refuse to settle for all the watered down coverage that's out there, all the endless spin and clickbait that we've had to deal with for so many years. But this has never been about one voice or one company. It's about a movement of people who refuse to sit on the sidelines, who are actually willing to take a stand. That's why Blaze TV matters, because when you subscribe, you're standing shoulder to shoulder with a community that believes that America is worth fighting for. And Blaze Media only exists because people like you step up and join us and help drive this mission forward. So when you subscribe, you're not just supporting a show, you're making your voice count and ensuring that the truth has a platform, not only just for today, but for the next generation. So join Blaze TV today. Go to blazetv.com/BNT and get $20 off. That's as low as $8 a month right now for an annual plan, and it's blazetv.com/BNT. Well, the FBI made it in the news over the weekend with Speaker Mike Johnson stirring the pot by suggesting that Donald Trump once worked with the FBI in the Jeffrey Epstein case before, of course, quickly backtracking. So is it a slip? Is it a smear? Is it a hint about bigger ties that Trump had to law enforcement? Decide for yourself. Let's take a look.
He's not saying that what Epstein did is a hoax. It's a terrible, unspeakable evil. He believes that himself. When he first heard the rumor, he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago. He was an FBI informant to try to take this stuff down. The president knows and has great sympathy for the women who have suffered these unspeakable harms. It's detestable to him. He and I have spoken about this as recently as 24 hours ago.
So, Chris Bedford, what's the real story here? What's going on?
I mean, it's not like he mixed up the different stories that Trump was active in exposing Epstein privately in his own companies, getting him kicked out of the club, keeping him away from people. I mean, those guys are social pariahs, people like Epstein. They're people who are extremely manipulative, people who are very friendly, very charismatic, able to convince people of fantastic lies. That's what they did to the girl. That's what he did to the girls. That's what he did to his friends. He had a lot of friends, and not all of them were involved in this freak show. So being able to detect that and out it. But what's interesting here is that the speaker doesn't list those two things as separate. He's not confusing them. He's not meaning to say, well, yeah, Trump has since been an FBI informant. That would be Trump has since talked to federal investigators about everything he knew and anything that could be of help. Trump was an FBI informant. Well, it sounds like he might have been.
Well, can we go back to that 2018 interview with Epstein's victim's attorney, Bradley Edwards, and roll that? Because this is very interesting.
The only thing that I can say about President Trump is that he is the only person who, in 2009, when I served a lot of subpoenas on a lot of people, or at least gave notice to some pretty connected people that I wanted to talk to them, he is the only person who picked up the phone and said, let's just talk. I'll give you as much time as you want. I'll tell you what you need to know, and was very helpful in the information that he gave, and gave no indication whatsoever that he was involved in anything untoward whatsoever, but had good information that checked out and that helped us, and that we didn't have to take a deposition of him.
That was in 2009?
That was in 2009.
I mean, Chris, that's some ancient history, but it bears repeating these days, and it speaks to exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, we have had every indication that Trump was not a close personal friend at all. He was an associate of Epstein. There's no indication he was guilty of anything. So when those things combine, when you're not shocked to hear this news, because by the way, you're already onto the fact that the guy's a creep. That's why you kicked him off your property. That's why you don't really associate with him very closely at all. You just keep your distance from people like that. And then someone comes up and says, by the way, that guy's a really creepy rapist and he's trafficking humans. Then the human impulse is going to be to say, how can I help you? You're not covering for yourself. You're not having to work through the process of, oh my gosh, really? Jeff Epstein from New York, the financier? No, you know that this guy's a creep. It all checks out. You don't have to figure out, has this person who I've known for years been lying to me about who they are their entire life? And you're going to be quick to want to actually help out in ways you can. I mean, the guy's a monster. This is not like dropping the dime on your friends for doing something out, drinking beers underage or something. This is exposing a child sex trafficker. So maybe that's what Speaker Johnson was talking about. But even if it wasn't, even if he was working with the FBI in this back then, it's not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
All right, if we're bringing up things from the past, let's go back to 2023 with the Gambino crime family, because why not? Let's watch Sammy the Bull reflecting on his past dealings with Donald Trump.
Actually try to press up on Trump, but you could never get to him.
Yeah.
Because he had ex-FBI agents all around him?
All the time. And I tried a couple of times to press him and make arrangements where I could work with him and earn with him. I did that with other big contractors. I had the power of the unions. I could do all kinds of little things, but I couldn't get to him. He wouldn't bite. He just wouldn't bite. He didn't want to do anything like that. And there was layers of people in the middle. One of my guys said, we'll go up to the office. I said, we'll go up to the office. Everybody around him is an ex-FBI agent. We'll go up to the office, we'll get cuffed, and we'll go right to prison. So forget about Trump. He's a legitimate guy. He don't want to do it. Forget about Trump.
Forget about it. When you hear somebody from the Gambino crime family, Matt, and they're saying like, hey, we tried, man. We tried to get to him. He wouldn't take these deals. And we know that Donald Trump, it's the art of the deal. It is what he actually cares about is going through and striking good deals. So what does this say to you that he wouldn't even back then, wouldn't take any of these deals?
Well, it's very convincing. I mean, Trump makes no bones about the fact he was in a dirty business where you give money to politicians on both sides to get things built in any city in America. But this is the sort of thing where, you could kind of see the style that Trump played. He wasn't going to go down that route, but he was a tough player in a tough business. And it speaks to kind of who he is, has been vetted for over a decade now. And we know who he is, and we know his vices, and they don't include, these kinds of illegal shenanigans. And if they had, I mean, God knows we would have seen all of this already.
And Chris, I don't know if you were looking on the internets earlier today, but they were trying to float out there Donald Trump and his signature with the Jeffrey Epstein card. And people were quick to point out, like, that's not Donald Trump's signature. Like, I think that we have a fraud here. But they will stop at nothing to just say, oh, no, there was a birthday card. It existed. Donald Trump is connected to this. Like, they will go to any lengths imaginable. And also, it shouldn't be that hard. If Joe Biden can use the auto pen and have all these pardons out there, then you can't even figure out what the president of the United States signature and Donald Trump, you can't figure out what that actually looks like before you're trying to fake a birthday card?
It's so stupid, the whole thing. I didn't catch a lot of internet today because the baby's many wonderful diseases finally spread to me over the weekend, and it's been a really fun Monday. But I did catch that. I still got that. And I'm looking at that. Well, it's the same stupid words that was printed in the Wall Street Journal. So it's not It's not in his voice. And it's not any voice that he's ever used in any situation, in any book, in any tweet, in any interview. One of the most highly recorded people of all time. And it's not a signature. And it's stupid. It's just, people are going to start getting sued over things like this because he's litigious, that's for sure. And yeah, I think that's a funny thing. And I love that Gambino story. I've had friends who had to do big construction in Manhattan, and you have to be pretty powerful and pretty tough
Yeah.
to deal with the different unions and the different organized crime syndicates. And I've heard some pretty violent stories where, one of my pals was just an architect working, and he didn't even know who'd been hired. But then he ended up having to quit the job when a negotiation between the union turned into a guy getting thrown off the top story of his building. And he said, you know what, I'm done here. It's a hard thing to keep out of corruption in New York and in real estate. And we know that the president, of course, has a history of having stiff contractors. And you have to work with shady people. But that's just a wild story you guys were talking about.
Yes, I want to take this back full circle to the FBI, since Gambino saying he hired FBI guys, and we weren't able to shake him down. And then you have people saying, look, he at least helped the federal investigation in some manner when it came to Epstein. But if you go back on some of these details that we were reminded of this weekend with this report from John Solomon, and you think about what the FBI was actually doing, right, in the past. I mean, you got Randall Coleman writing a memo to file the day before the 2016 presidential election. Why? Because he wants to say that the Anthony Weiner sexting case, they discovered these emails relevant to the Clinton email investigation. Nothing's done about it. I need to make a note of that, right? And then Kash Patel's team also discovering, the stuff about the Bill and Hillary Clinton Foundation, and then putting a pause on that, where Yates says shut it down. We've reported on that before. And then you also have convicted former agent, Charles McDougall, who's leaking information to a Biden-related Chinese company. I mean, this is what the FBI has become. By comparison, Donald Trump looks pretty spotless, no?
Yeah, he does. I mean, this FBI, I was just talking with Sarah about it on the way down so I could bone up on all my internet. This is my sick outfit. This is my work from home sick outfit, by the way. Still
We
wearing
were
a collar.
wondering.
Always wearing a collar. I don't leave my bedroom without shoes on. But yeah, this is what the FBI has become. This is what's so sad is the FBI, the way that Trump looked at it, the FBI, after the Church Committee, was a great law enforcement agency. It was not politicized. And so much of that changed after 2001 and the September 11th attacks that politics got back into it, surveillance got back into it, corruption got into it. And Sarah and I were talking about just an example of the FBI's investigations of Hillary Clinton and that Weiner laptop that's now open in the news that forced Director Comey to have to send an email or letter to Congress just before the election saying, well, we really hurried so quickly to shut down this investigation. We hurried so fast to shut it down and not do anything about it that we missed some stuff that other agents knew about, some stuff that other investigations and the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton libraries had already uncovered. We ignored it, and now we're in a really awkward position of having to show up and admit that we cheated on our homework, essentially. And that was just a wild moment. They did so much not to actually investigate Hillary Clinton, to drop anything about it. I mean, just compare some of what the FBI did with the Steele dossier. When they discovered that Hillary Clinton had classified this obvious propaganda tool that she used to try to lie to the federal government and convince them to ensnare her political opponent, she'd called that a legal defense. But when Trump talked about some of the money that he paid as an out-of-court settlement to a porn star he allegedly slept with, and he called that a legal expense, they gave him 34 felonies, I think it was. This is what they ended up charging him with, as opposed to an FEC misdemeanor note, which is what Hillary Clinton got for a significantly worse thing that was significantly more obviously not legal expenses. It's much harder to make the case that that's the case. So this is an FBI that was desperate not to investigate. It caused them trouble. And now we're seeing an FBI that's desperate not to get itself investigated. And I'm loving this moment. I'm loving the cringe.
We need it. We absolutely need it. And after a week in D.C., I have Chris Bedford's autograph. I know what it looks like. So now I'm going to go out there and have birthday cards signed by Chris Bedford. You never know what's going to happen after this. Chris, thanks so much.
Let's make the drawings cool, okay?
I'll try. I'll do my best. No promises. I'm not an artist. I'm not going to lie to the people and try and tell them I'm artistic. That's not happening. But we'll catch you again tomorrow.
See that?
If we're talking about the FBI, of course, we have to bring in our favorite, Steve Baker. He's going to weigh in next. Well, we spend a lot of time here talking about what's going on in culture and politics. There's a lot of battles and a lot of craziness, but there's something different for you. So if you're a woman listening right now, or if there's a woman in your life that you care about, listen up, because this event is called Share the Arrows. It's happening October 11th in Dallas, and it's hosted by BlazeTV's own Allie Beth Stuckey. It's the second annual one. It's designed to equip and speak the truth to women that are trying to stand firm in this world. And it's a day full of worship and teaching and real conversations with bold voices. And it's going to be an incredible experience. So if you're a woman that has been craving the encouragement and the biblical truth, then this is for you. So if you're a husband or a dad or a brother listening, well, think about your wife or daughter or sister, somebody in your life that needs this, because we have a culture right now that's constantly pulling in the wrong direction. This is a chance to stop and reset and get grounded in the biblical truth. So all the tickets and details are at sharethearrows.com. That's sharethearrows.com. Blaze Media broke the story when the current Miss United States accused Congressman Corey Mills of sextortion and accepting bags full of cash. The former girlfriend of Mills is now trying to get a restraining order against him, but things got wild at the courthouse as Mills tried to explain away threatening messages to her. Blaze News investigative reporter Steve Baker was there, and right now he's here with us to tell us exactly what went down. So, Steve, take us in there. I mean, I was pretty jealous of you on Friday that you got to be there in the courtroom. How'd it go?
Well, it was really started out kind of funny. I was actually looking down at my phone. I was probably sending one of you guys a message or something, and all of a sudden, the congressman says something to me. He says, "Mr. Baker, good morning. It's so good to see you." And he reached right across the into the gallery where I was sitting on the front row and shook my hand and greeted me with a big smile on his face. And just a few minutes after that, one of the sheriffs came up to the front row. There was some journalists sitting on the front row, and it wasn't marked like it is in a federal courthouse for press or family. And so some of us had taken up position on the front row of the gallery, and the sheriff asked us to move back a row. And when I did that, he turned around to me, the congressman turned around to me and said, "Steve," he said, "as much as you've been covering me now," he says, "we're like family now. So just tell them you're family and you can sit on the front row."
Quite a moment. Well, let's remind people what the core of this case is actually about, right? If we can show the text messages that are at the heart of this, which appear to show the congressman threatening his girlfriend or ex-girlfriend to reveal video and photos that he had of her of a sexual nature, which is, I believe, a felony offense in Florida law, and that's why this was all going down, correct?
Yeah, it's quite a serious offense considering the threats that are allegedly involved in these texts. We're talking about in Florida, under Florida law, the threat of what do they call it? Revenge porn, sextortion, that sort of thing has a fine of up to 15 years in prison, $15,000 fine, and so it is a serious offense. Now, this particular hearing wasn't a criminal hearing. This hearing was specifically related to Ms. Langston's effort to get a restraining order against the congressman from reaching out and contacting her any further. And one of the things that they made it clear in the hearing itself was how many times, 9, 10, 11 times, that she had specifically asked him to break off contact. Now, she blocked him on some of her social media posts, that sort of thing, but multiple people had access to her through her phone, obviously. That was hard. And even the congressman even contacted her through Sarah Raviani's phone on occasion, which of course is the other girl out of D.C., which was back on February 19th when there was a domestic violence called to the congressman's luxury penthouse suite there in D.C. This was the girl that had placed the call. And that's how Miss Langston, the reigning Miss United States, learned that she wasn't the congressman's one and only.
So, Steve, what was the congressman's response to these texts? I mean, what did he say? He must have maintained that he wasn't threatening her, right?
Well, this is where it gets into really a bizarre, almost laughable response to him, or to these messages, rather. He said that based on the fact that both of them were born and bred in the country. They were country kids. He was brought up in the country. She was brought up in the country. And so this was just kind of the way that they talked to one another. And then he hearkened back to when they had their first breakup and reconciliation sometime in 2023, that was the way that they talked to each other then, that they talked, it was kind of jabbing each other. It was more humorous. And he actually made the statement that he was kind of speaking to her in her voice, not really his voice. And so they weren't really to be regarded as threats at all. It's just, it was just their normal and usual banter.
Well, and something else that came up in the court proceedings, Ms. Langston went through and said back in January that the congressman had some suicidal thoughts, that the bourbon wasn't working. Take us through that. That's something that Ms. Langston has shared with Blaze Media as well, but it did come up on Friday.
Yeah, this came up, and the court actually wanted to see evidence of this. This was something that was quite interesting, and as a matter of fact, it caught most people in the courtroom by surprise, was that in text exchanges that he had with her going back to January of this year, that he was sending her photos and messages about his drinking, having a firearm with him, that he was drinking too much bourbon, and that he was considering thoughts of suicide at that time. Now, this was before their last and final, apparently, breakup at the time in February. But this was something that she felt very bad about. She felt a desire to work and help him through that. There were evidently some struggles going on already, because she had already begun to notice some things in social media related to the people that followed his accounts, her accounts, that was beginning to give indication that he might have relationships, plural, outside of the one that he had with her.
Well, I hope he's all right. Certainly, his mental health, I hope he's doing fine. But that is a kind of bizarre hearing for just a restraining order. A whole lot went into that. What happened at the end?
Well, it was a lot longer than what anybody anticipated. The judge had only allocated about 45 minutes for both the petitioner, that would have been Ms. Langston and her attorney, and then the defense, that would have been Corey Mills and his attorney. And it just wasn't enough time, because once you added in the cross-examination time of each witness, then it became rather lengthy. And as a matter of fact, they were completely out of time after Corey Mills' direct examination from his attorney, and by the time it was time for Langston's attorney to cross-examine him, they were just out of time. The court, the judge called them up to the bench, had a consultation with them for several minutes. If you've ever been in one of those courtroom situations, they put on white noise so that we can't hear the conversation that's taking place. And then once they finished, then the court began to instruct everyone that there was going to have to be an extension. There was going to have to be a delay, that they could not continue because of the other things that were on the docket that day in that courtroom. He even went so far as to say that he would have continued that on Saturday morning had he been able to bring in the staffing for that. But he said he just did not have the staffing available to go into Saturday. And then what he instructed from both attorneys were to get together, and that they would notify the court by 4 p.m. that day. That was just this past Friday, that they would notify him at that time, a mutually agreed upon set of dates where they could conclude this. How much more time was it going to take? They both estimated at least another 45 minutes apiece.
So they're going to continue that at a date that is yet to be determined. But we do know that the congressman is out there saying the February 19th incident from the D.C. penthouse when Sarah Raviani called the cops, that is all done. It's all cleared up, Steve. There's nothing to see here. So the congressman's trying to take a victory lap on at least one of these court cases.
Well, there's nothing to see there if you haven't actually read the police report. If you've actually read the police report, there's something to see there. Now, what we're dealing with in that particular circumstance is the typical, what do they call it? It's that DC two-step shuffle, however they refer to the Potomac two-step. It's just the fact that when you're talking about very important people, you're talking about Congress members, senators, and the like, they are going to get advantages from the local law enforcement that they don't typically get. In this particular case, Ed Martin was the acting D.C. attorney at the time, and what he told Blaze Media is that this was never brought to him. And in fact, what he told me specifically was that he got blamed for dismissing that, but he said that got dismissed at the supervisory level at the Metropolitan Police before he ever had a chance to review it himself.
Interesting. Well, we'll be following this. We'll see what comes of it. But the FBI been in the news a lot today. We've been talking about the FBI all day, and who better to talk about the FBI with than Steve Baker, beloved of everyone in the Federal Bureau of Investigations. So this is an interesting story that's developing. A friend of the show, in fact, a former employee of Blaze, Harrison Weinhold, on X, came out with this. He gave me a call. I know he probably talked to you, Steve. And what he said on X was very interesting. He said he was in a private group chat on Telegram with a bunch of Catholic guys in the New Orleans area, which is where Harrison lives, in that area. And he said his chat was being investigated by the FBI. They had been talking, I think the only political stuff they'd really been talking about was, other than just chit-chat, was organizing to protest pride parades and stuff like that. And he claimed that there was an FBI agent intimidating individuals in the group chat with a picture that either he got from, someone in the group or they were surveilling it. And the guy was saying he wanted to meet with them. What have we learned about this?
Well, we actually dove into it head first today. Obviously, when you start talking about FBI, my blood pressure gets up a little bit, but it also gets my curiosity up. And my radar began to ping on this after receiving from these individuals in that particular Telegram chat group the actual messages that the FBI were interested in. And these are the typical traditional Catholic. This is a Catholic group, very in terms of describing it for the masses. If you're not a Catholic, it's a more fundamentalist type Catholic group, and they want to see more traditional values become part of the law, which is interesting. In Louisiana, they probably have a lot more latitude there under the Napoleonic law system in Louisiana than they would in another English common law state. But nevertheless, they want to see these things take place where there's more of the adherence to Catholic tradition in the law than is otherwise currently stated. But one of the things that they were most concerned about, and what the FBI became concerned about, was their chat over a particular mosque in New Orleans that's planning on buying a church, and they're actually looking at converting this church to a mosque. This has this particular group upset. This is not something we wanted to see happen. And so they're like, it reminded me of the kind of chat going back to the Oath Keepers trial a couple of years ago, where you get a bunch of guys on a private message group that are throwing out words that are not necessarily inflammatory, but they could be construed as having some sort of ill intent behind them. As a result, the FBI has reached out to several of them now, actually showed up at one of the commander or the leader of the New Orleans chapter of this particular group, showed up at his house unannounced. He would not speak to the FBI. He lawyered up and said, no, it's not happening. And then after we reviewed these messages, I sent them over to some of our retired FBI buddies, and they're just shaking their head at it, saying this is typical of the FBI. Nothing has changed since the old administration. And in fact, when you look at the administrations at the various field offices around the country, this one, if you recall, the New Year's Eve bombing in New Orleans, remember when the chief of police called it a act of terror, and then the assistant special agent in charge, forget her first name, but her last name is Duncan. She walked before the cameras and she said, this is not an act of terror. And of course, that upset the entire country. And she actually was temporarily repositioned for a while. I don't know if she has her job back at this point. But the point being is our sources tell us that this would be exactly the kind of act that she would launch her investigators into to go look into. And again, this is a free speech issue. This is an issue of, obviously, they have been infiltrated already. This particular Catholic organization has been infiltrated by the FBI, or they wouldn't have been and had access to that private Telegram message board.
So I just, my head's hurting right now. I mean, I just want to get this straight. Jill, what we're talking about is a bunch of guys on a private chat group who are upset about a mosque buying a church and probably talking massive crap about it. And the FBI is spending its time surveilling them. I'm sure these are all people who have probably no criminal record whatsoever. And intimidating them and saying, I need to talk with you because what you're saying on a private chat as an American citizen about this mosque buying a church.
Yeah, it seems pretty normal. Let's go ahead and put up the other post on X, where this is what Steve was talking about. The agent shared the screenshots of our conversation saying that he's surveilling the conversation. So there's either an informant, which is unlikely, as this person wrote, or they're illegally surveilling the Telegram chat. So Steve, when you say this, you say that they have been infiltrated. Is this what your sources are telling you, that this is the way that things would be going down? Because as we've been reliably told, no, everything's fine with the FBI now. There's no need to worry. The Patriots are in charge. And yet, what are the options that we're actually dealing with here?
Well, first of all, I would disagree with Harrison's statement that it's unlikely. It's actually more than likely that they have been infiltrated, that there is an informant within the group itself. Now, can the FBI access Telegram and Signal? It is our understanding that they can, but it's more likely that they were infiltrated because, first of all, you have to know that they're saying stuff in order to look at them. There's no reason for any of their language that I read in the chat group to pop up for the NSA to flag it and send the FBI that direction. And so what I would surmise is that they have been infiltrated. And then to speak directly to your premise right there, the new FBI is just like the old FBI. There's a real disconnect between the seventh floor and the leadership there now, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, et cetera, and what's happening and what's still happening at the field offices around the country. This leadership that has been there for the last 2 decades and has developed under the Obama administration through the Biden administration, they are still there. They are still running the agency. They are still directing their agents on what they want them to work on. And one of the things that they're still getting credit for, and one of the things they're still getting bonus points for, is this thing of domestic terrorism. And unfortunately, and this is true, we've talked about this a lot in the past, is that these special agents in charge, they get very high bonuses for arresting and making cases out of just the right types of criminal investigations. So they're going to get a higher bonus for creating a domestic terrorist case than they are from, arresting drug dealers, bank robbers, and the kind of people that we see the Trump administration trying to take off the street today.
Well, my sympathies go out to Kash Patel and Dan Bongino for the task they have before them. There's tens of thousands of people who probably shouldn't be there. You got to figure out how to get rid of these people. But I hope they take this example to heart and take this up and look into it, because this is exactly the kind of thing where you talk about a waste of resources, Jill. I mean, there's a lot of serious crime going on in this country, a lot of serious things for the FBI to be investigating, not a bunch of guys talking crap, about a mosque buying a church.
Well, today on the calendar, it is September 8th. So this is officially the day that Andrew Bailey leaves Missouri behind and becomes the co-deputy director there at the FBI. So we'll wait and see. Steve Baker, thanks so much.
Thanks, Jill.
Don't go anywhere. When we come back, Gen Z, the men and the women in that generation, are they ever going to come together? Their thought process is so far apart. We'll break it down next. Well, NBC News put out a poll today that shows Gen Z's priorities. It was taking the internet by storm. So this is what they think is important to a successful life. And the men that voted for Trump answered one way, and no surprise, the women who voted for Kamala said basically the exact opposite. So having kids was the widest gap between them. But the one thing, MP, that they did agree on is that basically no one in Gen Z is going to be retiring early.
All facing that reality as they look at the economy and their life choices. No, I mean, that's actually a good sign. They see the problem.
Yeah, so the Gen Z women only want 6% of them are saying having kids is a priority, where 34% for the Gen Z men say that that is a top priority.
I mean, that is a shocking disparity.
So this is what I wrote on X today. How can we fix the gender gap between Gen Z? And what will it take to bring the young men and women together? So let's go ahead and get right to your answers. Jim starts us off and says the main culprit of this is feminism. Even on the conservative women's side, it's there. Get rid of feminism and bring back God. It's a great way to start things off. That's the way that we look at things, and because that's really when it all boils down to it, that's what it's going to take.
Yeah, I mean, not controversial at all there, Jim. But look, the feminism bit, I think what he means by that is the idea that having kids is somehow lower or beneath you as a woman that's a terrible idea. And you see all these guys very interested in raising families. That's a good thing. So, again, like what do you do with that gap? I mean, that is a gap where how do you get these people together to actually get married if they have really opposing views of what's important in life?
Well, Dalton replies, Gen Z will have to learn the hard way. They obviously haven't learned from their parents what TikTok hasn't taught. Manual labor can teach. I don't know how many Gen Zers are out there doing manual labor, but I hope that they are. If that's the way that they're going to learn, then by all means, skyrocket that number.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I get the sense of what he's trying to say, but at the same time, look, you ultimately you want successful careers. Everyone wants successful careers. I think manual labor is good. Working low-level jobs is good. It's good it does build character. It is a good thing. But ultimately, I don't think that's the answer. The answer here is alignment of values, between people valuing raising a family and having children. And the Western world is simply not doing that in most cases. So, that's a deeper problem than the kind of work you do.
And Ricardo wrote, limit screen time and interact with each other in real life. Ricardo, come on. What? Are we going to limit screen time and we're actually going to talk to each other? Now, I do know Gen Z, and they are not even calling each other on the phone. They're like, why are you calling me? I'll use Rebecca's Elko. She's like, oh, sorry for calling you, right? Our reporter out there in DC, she's like, sorry for calling you. No, that's a normal thing. If you need something from me and we needed to talk about it, a phone call is a normal form of communication. But yet in their mind, it was like, oh, sorry, I didn't just text you, but I needed an answer right away. That's what the phone is for.
Don't apologize. Don't apologize. Just call me up without apologies. I love it. We love it. This comment, limit screen time, interact with each other in real life. That speaks to me right here. I really think that there is a real problem with the kind of the culture of the screens and swipe right, and everyone knows it. It's hard to get out of. But when you do go in real life, like half the time, I mean, I know that they roll their eyes at me as the old man, but I'm looking at these guys saying, if you just go out somewhere to a public place and start talking to women, you would be shocked at what would happen. And I do feel like at some point that has to be part of the answer. People talking to each other. And the screens really do create this alternative world that is very harmful to dating and establishing marriage, long-term relationships.
Counterpoint. I tried to limit my screen time last night, and I turned Sunday Night Football off early, and I thought that Matthew Peterson's Buffalo Bills got their butts kicked. I came in today, and I was like, why is this guy happy? What is happening? And he's like, it was the greatest comeback ever. And I was like, no, you lost. Because I was trying to limit my screen time. I blame that. You know what? Like, every now and then.
That was a blunder. That was a mistake. That would be a good time to stay glued to the screen. And also all those fans who left, it bothered Josh Allen, it bothered me, my brother, and some friends were there, and they had a great time. And they stayed, of course, the whole game. But, no one circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills, and that was a great, great, momentous win.
Gen Z circling the wagons. They are staying positive. They are trying to figure this out. And every time that we look at Gen Z, right, we have Logan Hall, our digital strategist here with Blaze. Every time I look at him, I'm like, all right, there is hope for the next generation because they have taken everything that basically, like, the 80s, 90s kids have been taught, that they were like, oh, here's all the normal things. They're like, well, that's really dumb. We're not doing that. And they completely reject that. And they are trying to have and pay forward with their own way of life, which is actually just like the way that like our grandparents used to do things. And I'll give them that. They are actually creating something positive and hopeful, and they are not blackpilling. Gen Z, for as much crap as we've millennials have gotten, Gen Z gets praised left and right.
Well, I think that some of them are turning it around. And Logan's a good example. Logan, we're using as our example, used to come on the show. He does social media for Blaze. He just got married. They have a baby on the way. I mean, he's sort of an example of a success. And what I see with a lot of these young men that we're talking about, the ones who 34% say it's very important to them to have kids, is that they do reject, as you say, Jill, all the garbage that they've been preached. And they can be a little, abrasive to the older generations who look at them, but they really want something traditional. And they're rejecting a lot of this modern nonsense. And they're looking to rethink how they should live their lives. And they're doing that in a really bold way. And I guess my message of hope here would be, yeah, the women who voted for Trump, 6% want to have kids. Okay, we have a generational, really civilizational crisis in having children. But the young guys that I see who are out there who are saying this is what I want, who are countercultural and brave about it, I think ultimately they're going to turn America around. And they're the biggest bright spot of hope that I see out there. And if you haven't encountered these people, you've just met sort of the screen time Gen Z kids. Now, let me tell you, there's another brand of Gen Z that is rejecting screen time in ways that are unbelievable and actually trying to forge a way of life that makes sense in this century.
So 6% of the women that voted for Kamala. I'm sure that number is probably higher for the women that voted for Trump.
Yes.
But how ultimately do these two sides come together? Because we have a civilization here that we have to carry on.
So I have a friend who wants to set up a dating show in which every time there's a good-looking guy who's successful, and he dates these women, and then at some point in the conversation in the first date, he says that he supports President Trump, and then they kind of record the reaction, and you see what happens. I think that's a good idea. I think though that ultimately these guys stay strong. Are they not going to find wives if they're, they want to do normal things and they're successful in life and they're working on themselves and they're staying off the screens, they're getting in shape? I think we can find a way. I think some people are going to end up getting together and having big, beautiful families.
I would absolutely watch that show. You would get some viral moments in the first 10, 15 seconds over and over and over again with the lib women trying to go out and figure out, you voted for Donald Trump? Yes, a lot of us did. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you back here tomorrow.